Welcome everybody to the LSX Nordic Congress, and the specific panel that we will be discussing now is driving shareholder value through effective partnerships. My name is Kerpel. I'm the Managing Director of Kempen & Co., an investment bank working pan-European in Europe for life sciences companies. And I have the great pleasure of being joined by three fantastic deal makers in life sciences. That's Gunilla Oswald, the CEO of BioArctic. That's René Lussander, the CEO of Calliditas. And that's Don de Bettisi, who is here with us as a director, board member of Argenix. So what we would like to do is to discuss a couple of case studies that each of these executives have done with their company in terms of deal making and how that has worked on driving value from their own experience. And following that, we will also have an opportunity to grab their brain on how they look at the future of deal making, and maybe also some lessons learned from the deals that they have done. But before that, I would like to ask the three panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we go to the discussions. Gunilla, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
So I'm Gunilla Oswald, I'm the CEO of BioArctic. And BioArctic is a research-intensive biopharma company, and we focus on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. And we have programs spanning from very early discovery all the way to phase 3. And we have two great strategic partnerships, one with Eisai since 2015 and one with AbbVie since 2016. My background, I have been trained and raised with Astra and AstraZeneca for many years. So I have over 35 years of experience in drug development. So I think the combination of that, when also understanding the big pharma and the small agile biotech company and how you can bring out the best from each partner, I think is also key to success, which I will be happy to talk about today.
Thank you very much, Gunilla, and pleasure to have you on the panel. René, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course. I'm René Aguirre-Lucander. I'm the CEO of Calliditas Therapeutics. My background is quite different from Gunilla's. My background comes more from the investment side and from the financial side. Spent 12 years prior to joining here as a CEO. I was on the investment side of life sciences. And then 12 years prior to that, actually on more on the investment banking corporate side, raising money for life sciences companies and doing M&A, etc. So that is quite more my background. Calliditas Therapeutics, I've been the CEO here for 3 years, took the company public in 2018 here in Europe, and also took the company public on NASDAQ recently, a couple of months ago, as one of the first Swedish life sciences businesses actually to do that. And so the Calliditas focuses in the orphan space, and our lead product Nefecon is in the area of IgA nephropathy, where we are a global leader running a pivotal phase 3, which is due to read out in Q4 this year.
Thank you. And you will be talking to us on a very nice partnership that you closed for the Chinese area with Everest.
That is correct.
Thank you, René. Don, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jan. I'm Don de Bettisi. I've been in life sciences for over 30 years, initially in research, then managing research, and then co-founding a biotech company out of a big company called Targacept, which we took public on the NASDAQ in 2006. And then I moved to Denmark in 2012 and was CEO of a company called Santaris Pharma, which we ended up selling while we were taking it public, selling it to Roche. And now I made a decision to serve on boards. So now I'm on 6 boards and enjoying myself and getting to see a lot of different things. And I'm going to talk today primarily about a deal that we did at Targacept with AstraZeneca in depression, and with many lessons learned around how to work with a big company.
Thank you, Don, and that's indeed also a topic, how to work with big companies, that we will touch on after the case studies. But for now, I would like to ask you, Gunilla, to kick off with telling the story, how you did the deal making with SI, but especially also more recently, the deal that you did with AbbVie, on how you came to those conclusions and how you continue with those deals to keep them being successful. Please.
So BioArctic was founded 20 years ago, and then it was a small company with great science, but also with business competence. And then it has evolved, and I joined 7 years ago. And then there was already a collaboration with Eisai since 2005 in Alzheimer's disease. But we were still fairly early research company when I joined, and then I transformed the company into a public R&D company with focus on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. And I was very instrumental in the deal making of the alpha-synuclein portfolio deal, where we had a competitive partnering process. And this was back in 2015, 2016. And what I think is really important is that you make sure that you prioritize and involve the right people. I think that's really, really key, both in the partnering process, but also then to make the collaboration successul, because it's really a continuous collaboration which makes it a success. So, and also I think with my experience as a CEO, having been working a lot with science and drug development for so many years, and that when I was at AstraZeneca, I also was heavily involved in and out licensing and partnerships. So I had a lot of experience on what I have seen working well and not so well. So of course now, when coming to BioArctic 7 years ago, I really wanted to bring along all that experience and to utilize that in a beneficial way. So I think that it's really important for a CEO to be heavily involved and to bring along your best scientists and also drug development experience. You can't outsource all your commitment. You can bring in other people to support you, but you really need to stay involved. Then I think when you do the partnering process, I think it's really important to see how you select the right partner for your company. And I think it's important to have a common understanding of science, especially when you outsource or when you work together on very early programs like we have done. So we have been doing our partnering process in preclinical stage, and then it's really important that you agree on the science and that you agree on the development program, bringing the compound to the market in a way that you both agree on. And then to utilize each other's strengths. And I think during the partnering process, then you learn about different companies and different company cultures to see if that matches your company and what you want to achieve as a company. So I think that's really important to make sure, because you want to bring your program towards the patients. I mean, that's why we are here, to make it come to the patients for the benefit of the patients. And then when you have struck the deal, and I mean, we had a competitive partnering process. We selected AbbVie and AbbVie selected us. It was a really successful partnering deal. We got $80 million upfront and a total deal value of $755 million plus royalties if we come all the way to the market. And that was for a preclinical program. So I think that was a great deal and a great collaboration. So we started with a research collaboration, which we normally do. Which then led up to that they took the license deal ahead of time, because we had been delivering on the expectations in such a good way. In the collaboration, when you have the collaboration going on, it's really, really important, I think, that you agree on a common goal and an ambition for the program, that you have the same view on that, and then that you have structure. And that you are clear about who is going to do what, clear roles and responsibilities and so forth, and a clear way to, when you have different views, how you're going to sort that out. So I think that, and also listening to each other, I think this is key, really, to see what are the expectations from the other partner, but also from yourself, to make sure that you have mutual happiness with regard to meeting each other's expectations. I think this is key, and not just strike a deal. You strike the deal and then you think you're done. I mean, that's really when it starts, to make sure that you are meeting each other's expectations. And things happen, that's the only thing, you know, and then you need to manage all the things that are happening in a positive, successful way. So I think that for us, our secret sauce has been great science, great people, and finding the great partner.
Well, thank you very much. We'll for sure take some of these elements into the discussion later on. Don, can I ask you to tell the story of that you experienced with Targacept on potential lessons learned there? Mute is please unmute.
Thank you. So we did a deal with at Targacept. We developed a first-in-class opportunity using the nicotinic receptor for an antidepressant. Within the company, we took it through phase 2. Did 2 phase 2s, and it was quite positive as an antidepressant, and it was the first new treatment mechanism in 40 years. AstraZeneca had a very serious commitment to CNS that also came from Astra originally and was developed in the larger company. Seroquel was going off patent, and AstraZeneca really wanted to get a blockbuster CNS compound in, and depression fit the bill. We were far enough along that they were quite interested. And then one piece of advice I would give about this partnering process is we had learned a lot from doing deals before, and we rarely had any leverage. It was during a time where capital was difficult to get on the public markets or the private markets. So raising money through partnering was a way for us to develop the company. But by this time, in the 2009 timeframe, we actually ran an auction, and I'm on the board of argenx, and we also had a competitive process for the recent deal we did with Janssen at argenx. So I would urge everyone to consider a competitive process. I know that Gunilla has talked about the value of picking a partner that fits with you culturally, and I think that's very important. But on the other hand, often small biotech companies don't have leverage. So creating leverage in doing an auction. Auctions are risky because no one could show up. And my chief business officer told me that, said, Don, maybe someone won't show up. But that gave us leverage. We struck a very good deal. It was a $200 million up front for a phase 2 asset. It was an overall $1.2 billion biobuck deal in the sense of development milestones and sales milestones. We had a very significant double-digit royalty as a result of this leverage. But they took over all of development, and we had some small co-promotion rights. And AstraZeneca made it very clear to us is that they did not want to do a co-development deal with us. My ambition was at the time to do a co-development deal. They didn't want to do that. So we agreed to the deal we got, and we turned it over to them to run the phase 3 program. But they really wanted to get it done in a year and a half. So they did 2,000 patients and 400 clinical trial sites in 18 months. And that was an extraordinary effort on their part. And it was right after they had decided to outsource their clinical trial capability to Quintiles. So we were going to lose the quality control of the patients and everything. And when you're expanding that kind of a clinical trial program quickly, depression trials have always been challenged. So my lesson out of this was, number one, this was our big asset. And a lesson today is you can raise the money to carry programs, even big programs, forward on your own. And the danger of turning it over to someone else is in the translation and in the study design. We had a lot of input, but in the end, they were very experienced in CNS and decided many things on their own. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson that I got from this is, number one, see if you can do it on your own. You know, sometimes people want to do deals for validation of their platform technology and company. I don't think that's a good reason to do deals anymore. I think that value is limited today. But at that time, it was difficult to raise the kind of capital. But I think in hindsight, we could have. And we also had the former head of CNS and a depression guy, and Jeffrey Dunbar as our chief medical officer. So we were starting to staff up. And this is where I want to bring in the argenx experience. We are carrying a program forward in myasthenia gravis and autoimmune diseases at argenx on our own and raising money to do that. And argenx has been very skillful at doing that. But we were very fortunate in 2017, within the same week, of hitting two different compounds, two different complete indications. And it would have been impossible to carry both forward effectively. So we made a strategic decision that we would look for a partner. So in that case, where we were already building the company around autoimmune disease and immunity, it wasn't practical to build it also in oncology. And we also ran somewhat of an auction. It was a competitive process. And Janssen came out on top for a variety of reasons that Gunilla talked about. There was good fit, a real commitment to science, and we're very pleased with that relationship. I would say that it is always challenging when you have a big company and a small company. These are our two babies at argenx. The 5214 depression drug was our baby at Targacept. And big companies have multiple opportunities. And today, they not only have what's in their pipeline, but they have whatever they're accessing out in the entire biotech spectrum. And you know, I've had some other experiences on some of the other company boards where, you know, there's competition being brought in from the outside that's competing with the program that we had granted to a company. So holding on to it is ideal. It can be difficult to raise enough money it's daunting to think about building the infrastructure inside the company, but that's nothing compared to the clinical and scientific research risk of finding a drug. Once you've found a drug, most of the risk is out. I mean, it's a completely different kind of risk, but it's manageable risk in my mind. So that would be my admonition to biotech entrepreneurs now is hold on to your drugs. If you have to partner because it's just the indication is too big, then I would take Gunilla's advice, which is to really do some good matchmaking.
Thank you very much, Don, for those introductions to the different cases. And I'm sure we'll discuss several of the advices that you're giving later on. That brings us to Renee on a deal that you struck specifically in a certain region for your orphan drug in Asia, also an item, more specifically in China, amongst others, an item that is very hot also nowadays and probably on the table with many other companies where previously they may not have even thought of. Can you walk us through how that happened, why this was a good deal for Calliditas, and what lessons did that bring to you as a deal maker?
Sure. Yes, so we decided to embark on this partnering process because there was obviously requirements both for regulatory and clinical development locally in China. And that was not for a company of our size, really an option for us to kind of put people on the ground and drive that ourselves. So I think partnering for us really was the only alternative. And I think what you've heard from the other speakers as well is we also had the benefit of having a competitive process. So we set it up as a competitive process, and we found a huge amount of interest in China for these type of in-licensing. And this, particularly in China, has obviously gone through quite a change over the last several years. Probably was started as a catalyst within 2015. China State Council actually published this opinion on reform, of the kind of approval system, both for kind of drug substances and medical devices. That in itself really, I think, changed the entire kind of regulatory environment and market opportunity really in China, as there was a shift really from kind of a predominant kind of focus on generic substances to innovative medicines. And this, I think, has obviously been one of the driving factors, both from kind of Chinese companies who now see an opportunity in doing something different than what they maybe would have been able to do previously, and also where the regulatory reform is such that the timeframes have significantly shrunk, and therefore make some of these kind of partnerships much more viable than maybe what they had been previously. So what we found actually was that there was a lot of interest. We did run a competitive process. What we were looking for, though, was slightly different than what we've heard previously, because we were actually in a pivotal phase 3 trial, and the idea here was to see if we could explore an opportunity of having this regional player actually join our pivotal phase 3 trial, and therefore kind of compress time to market. Or if we would need to kind of do a more traditional partnership where there would be a completely separate phase 3 run in that region. So this is kind of what we were looking at from our side. Is really we looked a lot at the alignment and the culture of that party, what their experience was within that region to actually bring forward innovative medicines, which in our case was very important. And so the indication that we were looking at is an orphan indication in Europe and the US, but it is not an orphan indication in Asia. It's very prevalent in Asia. It's a chronic autoimmune disease of the kidney called IgA nephropathy. And this is actually a very substantial reason for why Chinese people actually end up in end-stage renal disease. So there was a very big market opportunity there as well. And I think that from my background, having spent quite a lot of time, many years, either investing in companies or trying to structure deals with companies, a bit like Vanilla was saying, is, you end up with a fair amount of experience, particularly of what doesn't work and what you have to be careful about, and what you need to kind of think about especially. And I think so for us, really what we wanted, and I think it's been mentioned by everybody here, is obviously, again, you are taking someone into your own trials. So you have to really kind of try and be sure that you listen to each other, you understand what those differences are. This is a different culture, is a different way of doing things. I think you have to be sensitive to the challenges that this poses. No partnership, in my view, is a walk in the park. It is always a bit of a give and take. And I think if you can set it up from the beginning as much as possible as a win-win situation, I think it is important. You are going to have disagreements and discussions, and it comes from all these kind of partnerships and collaborations. But I think for us, it was very important that we did feel that we had that kind of alignment and kind of alignment and kind of identification about what the goal is we're trying to kind of get to. But taking into account that actually we all knew that this is a different culture, it is a different region, there are different rules. And actually, if you look at the way that China's regulatory environment has changed over the last several years, it's breathtaking. And so I think it is something where we have to keep on, being adaptive and listening and understanding to some extent, what's required both from us and from our partner in order to kind of make this successful. And so I think when we did the deal, it was at the time, I think it was actually the second largest deal ever, actually in licensing deal of a clinical product between Europe and China. So it was $121 million with a $15 million up front and royalties. And so I think to Ganila's point, that's really kind of where it starts. And I think it is important that you realize to some extent that you want to be in a situation that when you close the deal, everybody feels good about the deal that's been closed, because it is the beginning of a long marriage, and so I think you have to be willing to take the time and invest the time going forward to try and actually get the best out of the partnership. as you can, taking into account that you will run into quite a lot of differences in terms of how things are done when you do, a lot of times, do regional deals.
Thank you very much, Renee. That's very, very insightful, and you already touched on a couple of things referring to a very long marriage that we'll have to make work. I'd like to take that idea within a few moments, but first take the opportunity on the regional deal making itself, because both for Don's and Gunilla's cases, it was all encompassing deals. But maybe can I ask you, Gunilla, how you and within your firm, or maybe from your previous experiences, look at these regional deal makings? Because we've seen with Renee for Asia, which is becoming an important market, and I want to hear it from you. But also differently, some companies have, for instance, out-licensed US rights and kept the rest of the world, or vice versa, European rights out-licensed US. How is your view on the regional deal making, and then specifically to China, developed world? How do you look at that?
So I think it's important to look at what your specific project is about. And if we look at BioArctic, I mean, we have our first deal with Eisai, which is a Japanese company. So that was a worldwide deal. And we still have some commercialization rights in the Nordic region. We also have the right to other indications. So I mean, I think every case needs to be looked at specifically. And our second then collaboration strategic partnership is with AbbVie. That's also a worldwide collaboration. We also have some commercialization opportunities in the future if we come all the way to the market. And they then licensed all of our alpha-synuclein portfolios. That was several antibodies and to all indications. So that's two quite different deals that we have, but all of them are worldwide that we are working on. And I think that also comes to that we have so huge patient populations. And I mean, AbbVie works on Parkinson's disease, but they also look at other indications already, like multiple systemic atrophy and Lewy body dementia. And so they are thinking in a broad perspective from the very beginning. And Eisai are with our BAN2401, which is in phase 3 for early Alzheimer's disease. They have already started a new phase 3 program in even earlier stages of Alzheimer's disease. So I think that the approach they are taking is really on a worldwide way. And they have also then a collaboration with Biogen, also with BAN2401. So I think we are 3 partners in that deal. And I mean, such huge populations. So that means it needs a lot of money to drive it in an efficient way. So I think that the way we have been working is really due to the indications. And I think it differs. If we have an orphan drug indication, we can drive that ourselves. We have the competence, we can do it. But for those huge populations like Alzheimer's disease, we need a global partner. And for us, I mean, since it's an Asian partner, they think in a global way. And I think we have 2 great partners. And also for us, it has been important to have some opportunities for commercialization in, for example, the Nordic region. So I think you need to look at each deal by itself and each partner.
Yep.
So, and I think it's different for different companies, but that's the approach for BioArctic.
Okay, thank you very much. Don, what is your view on that?
In terms of regional deals, I think often it's the case where you may, especially in rare diseases, where you may focus on the U.S. and be able to handle that as a small company. We had a big debate, of course, at Argenx about whether we would do Europe or not, and we thought we could do Japan, and there were reasons for doing that, and we were confident we could do MG in the US, and now we are blazing ahead with Europe as well, because as we got more prowess in the company and more experience and just got our feet under us, things were going fairly fast at first. So So I think there is a place to do regional deals, because you can't, you know, it depends on the stage and size of your company and how rapidly you can grow it. And I would say my observation coming from the US market and then coming here to Europe is it's, you know, trying to manage and navigate through European approvals and market and the different markets and everything. I think for US companies, I think many of them often think they're going to partner Europe because of the complexity here.
Thank you very much. To maybe a question to René then, back on regional deal making, and since you've been involved in previous lives, if you would partner for the US and leave Europe and rest of the world for you, or partner Europe, are you not selling an option to that partner to also acquire the rest of that asset? We've seen many examples of companies that partnered Europe, kept the US for themselves, but later on that same partner acquired the company in a total, or also took the license for that other region. What's your view on that?
No, and I think this is actually just to kind of go back to Asia. I think that, you know, China has not previously been a market that, you know, had been individually partnered. And again, I think that some of the catalyst I mentioned is one of the reasons why that's now changing. But I think a lot of times those markets were just not really exploited at all, even if you had a global relationship, because very few companies are big enough that they can actually do, you know, things really well everywhere in the world. I mean, that's it's a small group of companies that are able to do that. And I think this is actually an opportunity for smaller and middle-sized biotech companies, where they can now extract more value by being a little bit more clever, if you like, about kind of, you know, how they're out licensing their regional rights, rather than just doing what's always been done, like what's traditionally was done. But I think that in terms of kind of the what you're mentioning, obviously, that you have a partnership with someone and then you end up being, you know, bought by that company. I think it is obviously, you know, it is quite common. But I think also it's reasons where a lot of times in the beginning of a partnership, people may not know each other that well. So as you work together, you know, the risk is perceived to be lower. And I think particularly actually US companies have been quite unwilling to just kind of, you know, go in and make big decisions on, you know, kind of, or medium-sized companies to kind of take over companies that are quite small, because it's a bit messy and complicated, and it's in Europe and it's complex. And so I think once they've actually kind of maybe gotten to a point of you know, knowing things a bit better, feeling that they're more comfortable, and also probably where that company has spent a lot of time and money actually de-risking the European operation, potentially, where they've gone through what Don was referring to. It's a pretty long and complex, you know, process a lot of times. Then I think, you know, maybe then the US companies feel more comfortable making that acquisition decision that they probably would never have made in the beginning. So I think it's a part of that kind of getting to know each other, and for them to understand really better kind of what's going on in Europe, and being able to have their own assessment of the risk that they may be taking, and the opportunity, obviously, that they may be gaining as well through that partnership. So I think that that's probably one of the reasons why we see that. And I think it is interesting where European companies now, who I think used to very much always say, oh, you know, we'll commercialize in our region, or we'll commercialize maybe in Europe. And they always used to kind of out-license everything else. I think now it's actually, you know, become, interestingly, I think it's to some extent even become the vice versa, where actually some European companies are deciding to commercialize themselves, like we are. You know, we feel certain we have an orphan asset. You know, we can certainly manage this ourselves. It's a very concentrated prescriber universe. It's a specialist product. You know, we certainly intend to kind of commercialize ourselves in the US and then partner ex-US, again, for some of those reasons, in terms of having an orphan product in Europe is different than having a, you know, very broad product in Europe, obviously. So I think that you're seeing some of those changes where I think because of, you know, more experienced, you know, different kind of CEOs coming into companies with different kind of backgrounds, actually kind of taking some of that. And I think you're getting more international CEOs maybe kind of also, you know, taking different jobs in different areas, which maybe wasn't that common 10 years ago. So I think it's a fluid kind of situation where I think we're, to Gunnela's point, I think what we're trying to do is probably match the, the opportunity with, with the right, and, it depends on your indication, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, it depends on, how much money it's going to cost, how long it's going to take. I think you just have to be truthful about what is the opportunity and what can you really achieve and what risks are you willing to take, and try to kind of, really forge a strategy that you truly believe in and that you really know that you can deliver, to your shareholders, and also actually in that, get these drugs to patients, which ultimately what we're all trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I want to take the last couple of minutes for the other topic, and each of you has already addressed it. It's very important, and when you close the deal, that you then start a new life in good faith and good collaboration. And you are all involved in publicly listed companies, and we all know that there is competition of your asset within the larger firm. And if for one reason or another, the firm says, you know what, thank you very much, we're going to stop with the collaboration, usually share prices go one direction of the smaller party, south. So how to first of all make sure that you continue to get the attention of the larger player and that your deal is going forward as it wasn't originally anticipated. But secondly, if it then does happen that the asset is not further developed, how can you manage that the value of that asset is fully understood by your shareholders and that they are not running into a major panic? Maybe Don, if I can ask you on those two topics to give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a very important part of this is, with the Targacep deal with AstraZeneca with 5214 in depression, we were able to carve out in that deal the ability to do work in overactive bladder, actually, with similar molecules, which we had developed inside. So when 5214 failed in depression, we actually got it back at Targacep and took it right into an overactive bladder trial. So we just decided that depression was, somebody had, it was in the grave, so we left it alone. But I also think that, this is often you get false failures. So this is a term that a friend of mine has coined in a book called Loonshot. But where compounds are still relatively early when you do these deals with big pharma, and big pharma is taking something that they can see, they believe works on limited data, but you still got a lot of translational medicine to do. So, and I think the closer you can work with those teams, the more likely you're not going to get it back, that you can be successful. But as you move forward, and the big company decides they're not as interested or passionate about it, if you structure your deal right up front, then you can get that back, and then you can figure. And this is back to the shareholder point. Is if you've brought your shareholders along all the way, this is where communication is so important. And you can explain in a cogent way why you believe in this compound and why that's a false failure, and then drive forward. So I think, and then the other element, of course, is when you strike these deals. I didn't refer to this, but we were able to, when we licensed our depression drug out to AstraZeneca, we had already gotten quite a bit of shareholder value. It was starting to rise dramatically from the Great Recession, $3 a share. We were up in the low 20s by the time we did the deal. And then we went on up into $30 a share in a $1 billion company on the back of that deal. And interestingly, we had generalist investors start to come in on that deal as we move forward because of AstraZeneca's prowess in the CNS. So I think as a public company, you can extract a lot of value. If you don't talk to your investors all along the way and explain the value, then you're going to tank anyway if something goes south, but it's just a matter of how much it tanks.
Yeah, thank you very much on that. Gunilla, can I ask you for your perspective on this?
Yeah, and I think, coming back to, I think it's so important to have a common goal, and then to make sure that when you are working together with your strategic partners, that you also follow what's happening around you, to see how can you help to de-risk the program, and then to be really agile. I mean, we understood that there were some new added requirements from AbbVie. Along that, we had like a 3-year plan when we were going to deliver for them. And like 1.5 years down the line, or 1 year down the line, we understood there was some new requests that was not there up front in the research collaboration. And so I think it's really, really important, if we hadn't listened to that and handled and managed those expectations that were new, I don't know if we have got the license deal. But we did, so we did reprioritize our efforts, and we were then agile to listening to what their management was requiring from them, so we could meet those expectations and help to de-risk the program. So I think that's very, very important, that you are agile and meet that in order to make the best possibilities for a success that you can. And then I agree with Don that I think, scenario planning, to make sure that you can see different alternatives and to communicate around those. And like for BioArctic, we have several different programs. We can see different indications. And so we're not only, it's not only one compound, but of course, it's important that each compound succeeds to come to the patients if it is beneficial all the way. So I think that really close collaboration with the partner, and then scenario planning and communication around that. I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. We're very close to finalizing the panel here. And there were a couple of things that I wanted to use as a summary, in fact, that I picked up. So first of all, keep the asset as long as possible, I think was a theme that we heard several times. But partnering really depends on the indication that you're working. For instance, Alzheimer's use indications, huge size that you may be better off by partnering with a global player. I also heard that when the asset comes back from your big partner, it doesn't mean it's a failure. Don used the word false failure. Different usages of such an asset can be used, and as a public company, it's very important to communicate extremely clear on that, and to show and convince your shareholders that there is a life possible thereafter. We also discussed about regional deal making. We heard a very nice expose on René, who really very specifically worked in the Asian market, which is actually bigger than maybe in some other markets because of the specificities, but also there it's on a case by case, whether you should do regional deal making or not. And it was also mentioned that previously small regional deals were done to validate the asset, but that no longer is something that one should do. And then maybe the most important lessons that the three of you have given is that closing of the deal is just the start of a very long-term relationship, and manage upfront on how you will deal with specific discussions, and the marriage is for a very long term. So these were lessons that I took. It was very nice and very instrumental to hear from you, Gunilla, CEO of BioArctic, you, René, CEO of Calliditas, and you, Don, board member of many companies and experienced CEO from before. Thank you very much, and look forward to continue the dialogue.